everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. This week, we are going to be talking about doing more and more marketing with less and less. Not that we want to be too doomsdayer-ish, but this is something that we need to discuss. It's something that a lot of marketers are facing. And so therefore, we have got two people on the line with us today who are experts and are going to be able to answer some really hopefully valuable questions for anyone who is kind of experiencing this right now. So without further ado, Sam and Stephen, over to you. Stephen, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Stephen. I sit within the Dealfront partnership team. What that means is I work with all of our agency partners, helping them understand how they can best leverage the Dealfront platform, as well as working with our strategic partners, so our integrators and solutions partners as well. And just to give you a little bit of background about Dealfront and the t-shirt that I'm wearing, we're the go-to-market platform for Europe, helping sales and marketing with the right data insights to be able to do their day-to-day, with the sales intelligence solution that we have, providing the best in-market B2B contact and company data, and then also with our website intelligence tool with first-party data that you can use to be able to power your marketing insights and also highly tailor your sales outreach.
Yeah, I should be embarrassed because I look after marketing and I didn't wear the t-shirt, so Stephen's one-upped me there. But yeah, I'm the VP of Marketing at Dealfront. I've been with the company for about 5 months now, so exciting times for us. I've got a background in SaaS, been in SaaS for about 8 years, and I think I was working out earlier, I've been in marketing for about 17 now, so gone through these changes in the past and happy to share as much as I can.
Awesome, thank you. So let's start with what's happening in the market right now and what's happening, I guess, in tech especially, to make us feel like we're having to do more and more with less and less in terms of our marketing budgets and resources.
I think we're seeing the effects of the economic climate, right? So it's been in the press, everyone was growth at all costs. We got to spend lots and lots of money. And unfortunately, a lot of marketing became inefficient. We focused on the wrong things. We were focused on how can we grow quickly? How can we bring more and more into a sales team? And the changes that have happened is that the equity firms are now realizing that it's more important to be efficient. It's more important to be retaining customers, not just selling to anybody, but selling to the people you're going to retain. So we're seeing this big shift. I think it's caught some marketers off guard because now all of a sudden we're having to change tactics and maybe invest a little bit more in the long term. So brand and content is now playing a big part. But yeah, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think we'll come out better.
Yeah, definitely. I think Sam's right. The economic climate has definitely affected what we can do and changed budgets. But it's not only just the budgets that have changed, it's our actual buyers as well. They've definitely become more educated. There's a lot of content out there, a lot of disruption within the market, and it becomes very difficult to be able to enter those circles of trust that our buyers are in. So we've got to work smarter, align sales and marketing to be able to build that trust with our buyers and enter into that circle of trust where we can actually then present real value to them and hopefully bring them on as customers in this modern day world.
Sam, one of the things you mentioned, which I think is really interesting as one of the SaaS veterans on the call, is that, we did have a bit of a heyday, didn't we, at one point where, I'm not saying it was easy, because I don't want everyone to be like, what do you mean it was easy? But we did have a moment, didn't we, I think, in SaaS where we could fill our pipeline and we could hit our revenue targets without too much fear. And one of the things you were talking about there was that kind of like VC backed situation that we find ourselves in. Do you feel like that's already shifted for people in terms of, like the expectations on the businesses from that venture capitalist world that we now live in?
Yeah, partly. I think, as Stephen mentioned, the challenge is that actually all the way through the funnel, the conversion rates have got worse. You can lose a deal like last minute, and it can be because of something completely out the blue. You never knew it was going to happen. So I think people are adapting quite quickly. But it's one of those things. If you haven't invested in the brand and you haven't invested in maintaining or building that demand for your brand, it's going to take you a lot longer to get back to that point where you're comfortable and you're actually bringing people in at a level that you want. So I think people are adapting, but definitely there's still a long way to go. And I think for the biggest change I've seen is, as you mentioned, there was like the heyday, and I don't think marketers were really looking at efficiency or what's working, what's not working as much as they are now. So I think this is why we're seeing this rise of attribution tools. People are really curious about what's really working and how they can prove out the longer tail stuff like content or podcasts.
I think another interesting thing to mention, at least with the companies that I'm working with. So I work with a lot of all the companies I work with are basically VC backed. And whenever they get new money, there is this still kind of 2018 growth expectation, but really without, probably, I would say, the amount of money they put up is like a quarter of what they would have put up in 2018 to get that growth. So they want new companies to be very efficient and very fast still at growing. But obviously we all know that when you don't know what's going to work and you're a brand new marketing team or a brand new company, you can't be efficient. You get efficient eventually by figuring out what works. So I think the expectation on the marketers to be more efficient has changed, but the expectation that you're going to hit huge growth numbers hasn't. And there needs to be a balance between the two, because we can't do both at the same time. It's really, really hard.
Is that then not a founder problem? I'm sorry to chuck that out there, because obviously, there's an element of like, you're accepting huge amounts of cash, whether that's, based in reality or not. And therefore the expectation is misaligned from the outset, because you're kind of like, oh yeah, I can still accept whatever, round series
it's
I'm
not
in,
even
whatever
huge
round
now,
I'm in.
though. That's the thing, though. You'll get like a 2 million seed raise and they'll expect you to make 8 million out of it. And you're like, okay, sure. And it's like, do you take the money and let everyone get paid for that year? Or do you not take the money and we just all go back to doing, I don't know, what we were doing before this? I don't know. What's your thoughts, guys? Because obviously you work with other companies as well. So I'm sure you see a mixture of these kind of things happening.
I'd just say, from my perspective, speaking to other CMOs of similar size companies and other heads of marketing, I think it's like crazy how everyone's got the same goals. And it's, if you're 10 million and you've got to get to 30 million in this amount of time, and if you're 30, you've got to get to 100 in this amount of time. And like, it's almost like this blanket. This is what we expect from you. Follow this blueprint. And to your point, it doesn't really work like that anymore. So I am seeing there's some smart PEs out there in VCs. So I think they are starting to wake up. And that's where we'll probably see more of this merger play and maybe acquisition earlier on. Maybe, I'm not a finance guy, but maybe less companies trying to get all the way to IPO and more companies just going for those earlier exits.
Interesting. So back on the marketer side, so what do you think is going to happen to companies that keep cutting back marketing so harshly? Because we're seeing this a lot. And actually there's an episode in season 6 with a CRO called Timmy. It's a fantastic episode if you haven't listened to it, where he was talking about, when companies are kind of like at that point where they're like, oh, we're not hitting target, the traditional thing is just add more salespeople, but we'll fire the marketing team, we'll reduce the marketing spend, which is, and Timmy says this is categorically a mistake and he's never seen it work ever. And I'm sure you guys feel the same. So like, what happens when you keep cutting marketing back? And then also, are we kind of, as marketers, sleepwalking into just getting blamed for more and more stuff?
Definitely, one of the dangers, especially, is looking at your competitors and what they're doing at that moment in time, and are you potentially losing market share, whether that's on a short term or long term, depending on what that strategy looks like, and also what is your brand positioning at that time as well. If you're cutting back on your budget utilization, normally brand elements is where things get cut. You start cutting back on those sorts of activities, and that can definitely affect the perception in the market, the trust that you have, and then also as well will limit you getting in the door at the top of the funnel, and you tend to then see a lot of kind of demand gen and looking for those kind of quick and easy wins, that low-hanging fruit that's at the bottom of the funnel. And it's great for short term, but as a long-term strategy, it's just going to mean that you might kind of solve things initially, but on a long-term basis, it's only going to lead to trouble. And I'm sure Sam will be able to add to that in more context.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, and it happens all the time. I've done it myself, so I can't I can't say it's not a mistake that's avoidable. I've done it in the past where I've had targets and I've just spent on the things which I know are going to bring in leads or bring in revenue, and then you get 6 months down the road and you go, shit, where's all my pipeline gone? Why is everything getting more expensive? Your cost per lead goes up because you've lost that awareness piece. You're kind of educating people with your Google budget, and it just becomes more and more inefficient. So I think that the challenge is having to balance, and it is that long and short that I think people talk about. There's a book, and I'm not going to be able to quote it, but the long and the short of it, and it is balancing that, like making sure you're focused on long-term marketing while keeping the short-term there. It's probably I don't think it's not like it's all marketers' faults, but I think we've also led into it because we've been so focused on the short term and so focused on the quick wins. And again, there's the whole debate about lead generation or demand generation, and I think like that's led into this where so many companies focused on lead gen. Now, if they cut their budget, they're left only spending on lead gen and they're not building that brand. So it's definitely something to watch out for. And as companies move forward, I think just keeping an eye on the brand and building that awareness.
Also bring it into kind of practical terms. So I see that happen a lot when it comes to lead gen versus demand gen. And if you don't know how to picture that, so with demand gen, you tend to have a base that you are working off of. So let's say your SEO is really good, for example. You're going to keep your SEO and then you can top things to get to your next growth level. So if you are doing lead gen exclusively, and if you stop paying for things or you stop pumping out whatever it is that you're lead genning with, that you're going to stop growing, that's the point where you need to be concerned with future growth targets, because it's going to be very hard for you to keep upping yourself every single time, because there's just not enough resource and hands and leads to be generated at that point. So I just wanted to throw that in there as like a practical example of what the difference between the two looks like.
But what you're talking about there, Ruta, is that's what then leads to some of the shitty sales practices that we then see when everyone starts to panic, right? Because then if you are still just doing the lead gen stuff because you're like quick, then you get all this kind of like infighting in the sales team. You get really dodgy outbound stuff going on, which just quite frankly doesn't work anymore. You start to see all of those things and very quickly everything unravels. We've all been part of it. It's not very pleasant when it happens. But that's the reality, and we don't want to do that. We want to avoid it. So yeah, I think from what you guys are saying, it's that focus on the long term and the short term. If you can do that, and that is quite tricky as a marketer, because obviously naturally one of the things that happens is you've got an SLT and a founder that's probably panicking and a board that's panicking. So I think before we get into kind of maybe what founders can do, I'd be really interested to hear from you guys, like how can like we as marketers maybe maintain some calm so that we can help our SLT and our board members not completely freak out when this stuff starts to happen, and help them understand the kind of long-term investment in our marketing.
I instantly picked up on the SEO part because I think that's a really good example of where you're not going to get results in the first month, probably not the first, maybe 6 months, but it does take time to really start seeing those results. So in my experience, it's about setting expectations. Like prime example is I launched an ABM campaign in a company where the sales cycle was 12 to 24 months. So to expect revenue in 6 months, you're not going to get it right. You've got to wait for the sales cycle. So actually, we had to set expectations of what we were doing, and we broke down into these leading indicators of, this is how we are measuring that it's successful in the first month and the first 6 months and the second year and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's a key part for marketers, is to look for those leading indicators. How can they sell it in to prove that you're moving in the right direction? And I think going back to the SEO topic, if you can prove that the right people are coming to your website, you've got the right traffic, you might not be getting closed business yet, but you can see that your ranking's moving up the SERP and you're getting higher and higher. It fuels the conversation to be able to say, look, we are going right. give us time. It takes a bit of time, and we'll get there, and the benefits are going to outweigh the initial pain.
And Stephen, in terms of your side of things, obviously you're in partnerships. That feels like that sounds bad. I didn't mean it like that. That feels like a really solid strategy for tough times. So actually finding people that you can collaborate with and you can team up with and basically enhance what you're both doing on each side. Is that how you think about kind of the partnerships that you guys get yourselves involved with?
Definitely, and I think to your point earlier that with demand gen, it's not a role, it's not a department, it's something that the whole organisation needs to align on, and something that you can all affect. And partnerships is definitely a big part of that, with being able to leverage your agency network for being able to get content out there, for being able to do collaborations with them, co-sponsored content, ghostwriting as well, and then also working with other tech vendors that are in the same sales cycles as your current customers, so that you're aligning on ICP and you can really kind of start to collaborate together and create true value for your end customers. And that's where we've seen a lot of success in being able to not only just share the budget, the time, but then also being able to share the expertise, the knowledge, the data that we all hold, to be able to create these really strong strategies that are evergreen, organic, and we can continue to build those relationships. So partnerships is definitely a really good strategy for being able to amplify content and to be able to also create really valuable content as well.
It's interesting though, because I'm not saying this happens a lot, but I imagine that partnerships could fall into the same category as some of the other marketing and sales kind of expertise, like customer marketing or product marketing, those sorts of things. And then when the chips are down, they tend to be the ones that get cut because everyone goes, just new business, please. We don't want the other stuff, which I always think is a categorical mistake. It's like, why would you not invest in the relationships that you've already got with your clients and your partners? Mad. Is that something that you've experienced, Stephen? And like, what would you say if you have to counter that kind of argument?
Basically, has Sam tried to fire you before?
not that I'm aware of at this moment in time, but I'll see after the call. But no, it's definitely partnerships. It is, even though it's been around for a long time, it's still seen as a relatively new concept. It's something that you always do have to fight to make sure that it's high on the agenda and being talked about across the C-suite, and mainly making sure that we're actually aligning our numbers to what actually matters to the team, and across all elements. So making sure that we're having regular meetings with marketing, making sure that we're having regular meetings with sales, with our CSMs, with our products team, and understanding what their metrics are, what is their monthly goals, what are their KPIs, and then how can partnerships actually affect those things, and then trying to go back and make sure that we then set that as something that we build into our own strategy and then prove against those numbers. I think that's where we've had to really work hard to build those alignments and then prove that we're adding value, not just as another revenue channel, but also of other pain points across the business as well.
And you both have kind of mentioned the metrics and the tracking side of things on different points. So it'd be great to know if your metrics have changed as the economy has changed, or obviously, Sam, you haven't been at Dealfront for very long, so maybe thinking about how it's changed over your career or over your time here, and we'd love to know some of the maybe specific changes that have been made, if there are any.
Yeah, I think actually to Emma's earlier point, there's definitely more of a focus on customer and retention rates, and I've seen that in the last probably 5 years, to be honest with you, where it's slowly been creeping in, and marketers are now, or businesses are looking more at it, but marketers are looking at how they can influence the retention rates. But I also do see it get dropped quite often. So I do agree that often it's kind of like let's just focus on new business because we can sell our way out of trouble mentality. But yeah, that's definitely one, looking at the SaaS metrics of NRR and revenue retention overall, I think is important. For me, overall, we've always had, since I've been in SaaS, we've always had some kind of efficiency, and that's changed. Sometimes it's been, your CAC payback, or sometimes it's been your cost per $1 or cost per pipeline, or maybe you're even just looking at leads. So I don't think there's been too much shift. I just think marketers are getting more and more used to talking about the data. And I was actually going to post this on LinkedIn just to see what people thought, but I feel like the tool I use most is Excel. So it's kind of like a sign now that, the most I'm doing is in Excel, looking at data and cutting things different ways to see what's working. I would say that's the biggest shift is people are just so into it now and making sure they know what's happening.
And then from the partnerships perspective, one of the things that we've seen a big shift on it was always very much around source revenue and how much can our partners bring in. And then we've seen more of a shift towards that influence revenue and starting to look at how can our partners and how can our ecosystem actually affect different parts of the sales cycle. So that's some of the things that we've started to see drift in, is understanding, as I say, what influence revenue, what touch points can our partners be involved in, and what does that mean. It's definitely not an easy thing, trying to get the right metrics and make sure that you are able to spot where partners are truly influencing. Can be difficult, but there's definitely tools out there, attribution tools, tools like Reveal and Crossbeam that are able to enable you to analyze which partners are involved and across your kind of current opportunities within pipeline.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were delayed or not.
No. So we've spoken about some of the things that marketers can change and look at when it comes to doing more with less. What about then the SLT and the founder side of things? So how, if you were in those shoes, and you are in those shoes, how would you be looking at this problem and, I guess, enabling your teams to work better with less resources?
I'll start. I was waiting for you, Stephen. I think you're. I think it's. I mean, Stephen, you nailed this earlier about the demand gen piece. It's a mentality shift. It really, really, really is. And I can give you examples where I've spoken to people, or I've advised a startup, and they've said to me, "Oh, we want to do demand gen. That's all we want to do. Like we know it's the right thing." And then you look at what they're looking at, and they're looking at leads. How many leads, and I think that's the problem. Is like you can read something on the internet and think it's a good idea, but you've actually got to understand that you've got to change the business, and it does involve that sales marketing alignment, and having that revenue team all focused around the same things. You're probably going to go through a period of change where you're not quite sure what you're looking at anymore, because you might still use leads as an indicator. But ultimately, you could be 10-20% behind target and 20% over target on revenue. And if you achieve that, then you're obviously doing something right. So I think that's like for the SLT, it is actually aligning behind the strategy and knowing that it is going to change the way you look at the business. The other piece is just knowing that the change doesn't happen overnight. It's a roadmap, right? You've kind of got to go through it. It's going to take you 6, maybe 12 months to get into a position where you're more comfortable reporting that way and knowing what's happening. So I think giving marketers the time, allowing them to go through that transition, and the sales team as well. And then lastly, I think it's especially for CEOs, because they're more than likely the one reporting back up. It's just important that, again, they understand that you're making that change. They understand how you're now measuring the business, and they're supportive in that sense, but also they're not now chasing for leads, or they're not chasing for certain things which maybe you did in the past, because again the strategy does change quite a lot as you go through the change.
Definitely, I think Sam's nailed it there, but I think the main thing is making sure that you open up those communications internally, making sure that you have strong relationships across all teams, alignment around goals, and have regular updates, and make sure that your reporting is not locked away and behind closed doors, and it's something that everyone has access to see. One thing that we have is we have regular cross company updates from marketing, from sales, from products, and it's great to kind of understand wherever everyone's at, what pain points everyone's seeing, and also, share those successes together, and not just always be talking about maybe where things are not quite right at this moment in time. So that cross kind of team alignment, and then also making sure that, people, different parts of the team are aware that they can affect, things that are going on in marketing. They can collaborate with marketing. They can add value to the marketing engine.
I like to think in organisations where marketers have got hold of their data and they have got those metrics, that they are hopefully communicating them effectively. I think there are probably quite a few people listening to this who, unfortunately, not by their own doing, don't have access to the data because they're a small marketing team, or it's really, really difficult because maybe they don't have the budget. They probably might not have the budget they need in the first place to get hold of their data. Any I guess just any thoughts on, like, if you are in that situation, because like we've talked about a lot, we are expected to do more and more with less and less, and having the access to that data is really important. Is there anything that you would recommend people do to try and how they could get hold of that if they don't necessarily have access to the budget or even the type of tech that we're talking about? I know, Sam, you've already mentioned the Excel spreadsheets, but what kind of stuff could you be measuring?
Yeah, I think the budget. I'm going to sell attribution tools now. This is I'm going to change fields, but I think the budget piece is interesting. So it does depend how much you're spending, but if you work with some of the attribution tools, and if they can make you more efficient because you know what's going on and you can save that cost, it kind of does weigh up. So I would challenge it a little bit in the sense of, look, go and have a look and see what, again, if you're a very, very, very small marketing team, there's not going to be value. But if you're reasonable size, I would say look to offset some of your ad budget into an attribution tool because you'll get better results off the back of it. If that's not an option, then, Google's still a good tool. You can get a lot of information out of it. I think pulling out the, even just the basic conversion metrics, GA4 is a bit of a pain in the ass. I've not quite got used to it yet, but there's loads of information in there still. So I think you can go and find that data and just start. I mean, personally, I play with things and try different reports and see what's working and see if you can find trends and build on that. And then I think, again, it builds up your trust within the organization that you're looking at the right things, and actually gets you into a position where you can then go and say, look, I need an extra $2,000 for this tool, or I need an extra whatever it is for this tool, or whatever, because you want to go the next layer deeper. So yeah, definitely start with Google.
And a little shameless plug, but using a first-party tool that's giving you website intelligence. There are other providers out there as well. They can be relatively low cost, and even though it might not give you all of the metrics that you need, it is going to provide you the detail that your ICP is visiting the website, they are interacting with content that you're creating, and you can then start to understand which channels are working best, so that rather than focusing on a widespread approach, you can get really tailored and just align on the channels that are working for you. I think one of the things that's going to be hard to always kind of point back to speaking with a founder is rather than saying, last month we were running so many campaigns, whether it was 8, 10, and now I'm looking to go, cut that down to a few, but really go high quality rather than the mass amount of content that we're going to be producing. We're going to cut that right back and really go tailored and make more of a high quality approach. If you have a tool that at least allows you to prove that you're generating the right awareness with the right individuals, and it's not just kind of vanity metrics that you might potentially get from the likes of GA, where you're looking at traffic numbers rather than quality metrics, then that's something that's going to at least be able to show that you're seeing traction early on, rather than having to wait for sales numbers.
I think one also cool point is that in terms of founders specifically and CEOs, you have to share the burden that you're putting on the team by asking them to do more with less. So you can't just, let's say we're doing a 2024 kickoff, you can't just shit the target onto everyone and just let it fester and be there. You have to be accountable for being like, guys, I know this is going to be really hard, so we all need to figure out from every space that we can what the strategy is to do that. It's not, marketing, now you have half the money, but you need to do double the performance. Enjoy, bye. Because I hope you don't get to experience this, but this does happen. So yeah, it's sharing the burden, because your CEO is the person driving the strategy and is the person ultimately responsible for the success of the company. So do not just share a target on people and expect them to reach it. Like, we don't work like that.
I think there's a really good point there as well, just about how the targets are being created, and was marketing involved? Did marketing get to look at what's coming through the funnel, and if they believe they've got enough demand to actually help achieve that target? So yeah, very good point, and marketing should definitely be crawling to make sure they get a seat at the table to chat about the targets.
Well, yeah, because if they're not grounded, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, so often they're not grounded in reality. It's like, where did these targets come from? And it goes back to the original point, which is, did it come from how much money you borrowed, or is it actually based on your real numbers? And marketing are the ones who've got those numbers. So if you're a founder and you're listening, you need to speak to your marketing team.
I love to do the death by spreadsheet for founders, where basically I take their current world situation and then put the target that they want to achieve, and then like break down what that actually looks like, to like usually like how much pipeline you have to generate each month and how many people that equates to. And I'm like, okay, so you want to achieve this, but you're giving me 20% extra budget and you're firing 3 people. How do you think that's going to work? Tell me, I want to do this for you, but can you just tell me how that's going to work? And then they're like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, cool. This is the starting point. Let's now talk about a life that we can achieve together. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else likes to do that. I find it enjoyable.
I love it. I've got a really funny example of this, where someone was giving their marketing person a 60k marketing budget, and then we worked back what their ROI was, so how much they would realistically need to spend on marketing. It was 300k, and like, it was a relatively small business, right? But they all of a sudden went, we can't spend 300 grand on marketing. I was like, well, you're not going to hit your new business target then. And they were like, all of a sudden, like, you see the cogs turning in the panic. But it's the truth, isn't it? It's like, you need to know the reality. These are the reality of your numbers. This is what it tells you. And it's like, you can't really deviate from that. None of us have got magic wands that we could just, there's no secret demo tap somewhere, is there?
Emma, just make a LinkedIn campaign to cold audiences with book a demo, and they're all going to come running. What do you mean there's nothing? Job done.
I have made that mistake, though. Again, I keep admitting all my mistakes, but made that mistake of adding improvements all the way through the funnel. So you're like, okay, I'm going to get 10% more leads, and I'm going to convert them at 10% better, and then I'm going to do this at 10% and this at 10%.
Oh, Sam.
And you go, yeah. And you go, shit, this is never going to happen.
Yeah. I'm going to become 10 times better with no more money and no more time. Let's go, Yeah. We've all been there.
It's that optimism that we all have. We all hope that it's going to work out like that, but these days it just doesn't. Okay, so don't do that to yourself.
And at some point, you're trying to make the spreadsheet make sense, right? You're like, how can we actually make this number make sense? And you kind of get carried away, and then you look back at it and you're like, oh no, I can't do any of this. Like, this is wild. But yeah, I think that's a common one. I think we've all done it. Thank you so much to both Stephen and Sam for joining us. It's been a really insightful episode, and I'm sure this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about this area of marketing topic. But if you do have any questions, jump onto blameonmarketing.com, where Sam and Stephen are going to be. I'm just going to pre-sign them up in this episode, and you can have a chat with them directly and also find out more about Dealfront. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.